5 is for a desire to know God. And this is a big one because there's nothing more important than praying for your kids to know God. You know, we want them to be in an intimate relationship with their Creator. Ezra chapter 8 verse 22 says, the hand of our God is gracious to all of those who seek him. We talked about that earlier. Those who seek God will find him if they seek him with all his heart. Ezra just said the hand of our God is gracious to them when they seek the Lord. Psalm 86:11 says, teach me your way, Lord, and I live by your truth. Give me an undivided mind to fear your name. I mean, that's what we're praying for our kids, that they would have an undivided mind in their pursuit of God. We could talk a long time about how the devil loves to divide our minds, right? He loves us to think this way about these things, and then this way about these things, and this way about God things. But he said, I want you to have an undivided mind as you pursue us. Yeah, I think some of the best things you can do as a parent is, number one, to model what it looks like to love the Lord with all your heart. Number two, to put your kids in an environment where they're saturated by the Word of God. The Word of God is just all over them. They're around it. And number three, pray, like this says, for them to have a desire to know God. And as parents, sometimes it's hard to trust God with that. Some of you have students who you've been praying that a long time. Some of you have adult children, and you're like, man, they've been lost forever, been praying this forever. And the hardest part as a parent then is to trust God and his timing and his sovereignty to meet our kids at their point of need and to reveal their need for him. And yet that's such a powerful prayer to pray for. And sometimes I think God uses that waiting season, even in our own hearts, to trust the Lord differently. And so, yeah, this is a hard prayer to pray, but there's nothing greater than when our kids finally get it, you know?
One of the things I would say to someone who does have older kids, maybe who are lost and, you don't feel like you have a way to speak to them, just pray that the Lord would put somebody in their life that they would listen to, that they respect.
Sometimes putting your kids in a godly environment like that, it means that you're going to have to be the bad guy. So kudos to you who have kids in a Bible study class right now that they don't want to be in. I think that's awesome. I don't think I would be saved, and I promise I wouldn't be in ministry if my parents would have let me make the decision about church when I was a kid. I never wanted to go to church. I hated church. And if my parents would have listened to me, there's no telling what my story would be today. And so I'm grateful for parents that were willing to be the parent, parents that were willing to stand up to me and not let me run the show, but parents who said, you know what, absolutely not. You're going to be in this environment. Now you can't make them listen. I've just seen it so many times how God breaks down walls in those environments, and he uses the obedience of a parent to speak to the heart of a kid. And so kudos to you. For those of you who send your kids to camp and you prioritize that over sports camp and you send them to VBS and you make sacrifices to make sure that they're in environments where you know that the gospel is going to be preached. Because what you're doing is you're putting them in a position to meet with the Lord. Salvation always starts with God coming to us. And God comes to us when we're in seasons like that. And so, as a parent, I think it's great to put them in that position, but secondly, to pray that they would have a desire to know God. It's just cool when you see it all come together. Lastly on that one, I would say that, don't stop praying for your kids to know God at the time that they're saved. Right. Man, that's the time to double down. Right? Because then the devil's working overtime to try to distract your kids. So start praying even more. Man, God, I pray that they would have a desire to know you today, to dive into who you are, to learn your word. You're praying those kind of prayers really for the rest of their life. You can force feed your kids when they're little, but ultimately you've got to back up and just start praying that they would have an independent, personal hunger and thirst for righteousness, because ultimately, when you're not there, that's all they're going to be left with is their relationship with God and their hunger for more of him. And
that's really cool when you start seeing your kids take ownership of their faith and start reading their Bible on their own and start praying on their own and start bringing friends to church and start telling friends about Jesus and really start owning that faith. It's a really cool thing.